Lanka's economy is indeed rebounding. Year-on-year GDP growth for the third quarter has been 5.5% on the positive side. That's a fairly satisfactory state of affairs. But are we taking care of the geese that are laying the golden eggs? The small and medium scale businesses which are keeping the economy together and driving the country forward right now. Good evening and welcome to Face to Face. With me this evening is Tania Abeysundara, who is the chairperson of the Ceylon United Businesses Alliance. Tania, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, Viksha. Thank you for having me, MTV. Thank you for having me.
Now, Tania, much of the credit for the economic recovery of this past year, 2024, must go to the SME sector. Those are these small businesses and medium-sized businesses, I believe up to 500 employees, but most of them would have 5 employees, 10 employees, 20 employees, and they have somehow soldiered on through all the terrible times, and they are now driving the economy forward. But Tania, are we doing enough to help them, to protect them? You of course are a spokesperson for this sector. Can you tell us a little bit, first of all, about the SME sector, small and medium enterprises, and how important are they to our economy? How much of the economy do they make up?
Thank you for that question, Alexa. I think I have spoken about this umpteen time, like everywhere in the world. Even the Sri Lankan economy revolves around the SME sector. We contribute 52% to the country's GDP. We host
so more than half of the country's GDP is through these small and medium businesses.
Absolutely. If you were to take the 8 million workforce, nearly 72% of the workforce is hosted by the SME, other than, because if you take 1.7 million is the government sector, government employers, and if you were to take the bigger company, blue chip company, they must be hosting about 2 million, but the rest of employment comes under the SME sector. So this is a huge number. So, and then you were talking about the economical growth. That shows our capability and the strength of the SME. Of course, we have undergone a lot of significant difficulties during this pandemic era to the economical crisis of the country.
It's been a long time, isn't it?
It has been,
I mean,
2019 to 2024. That's a long era. Up to now, we are still struggling to come out of the crisis created by the government. So, when the country was called bankrupt, it was not the country bankrupt.
It was the
government bankrupt. So, this is, a lot of people get this in a wrong nutshell to say that the country was never bankrupt. Just because the government didn't have the adequate funding to pay the loans. That's what made the country bankrupt, because we borrowed money and we didn't pay, like the SME is facing today. So the government didn't pay their funding due to mismanagement of their own doing, but the SME did not pay the banks. It's not due to mismanagement, due to economical crisis that was created within the country by itself only.
And mainly by the government's mishandling.
Mishandling the country by itself. The government is the country. Country is the government, sorry. So this formulated the SME sector to, get squeezed and go into isolation. Because SMEs are organizations, they build themselves by themselves. They have never asked for any sort of huge helping from any government, and neither this government that we have asked them things that to do wonders for us, because wonders are not necessary for a SME organization to thrive or to go forward. Policies, proper adequate measures to be taken in order to sustain their sustainability.
Now, do you feel, Tania, that any government in the past has properly prioritized the SME sector?
I don't know about prioritizing. I think every government sold the SME for elections.
Election campaign promises.
Absolutely. Right. That of course happened through every government. That was their key point. You know, trying to protect the SMEs. We will bring a new future for the SME organization. The SME will thrive under their regime. That was their slogan in the election campaign. Every government who was every election.
Every party.
Every party. That was their campaign. But of course, that was one reason. Main reason today the new government was also elected, because I could firmly say I had vocaled out very boldly 3 years back of the misusement of the regimes that was in power, that has caused us to bring this country into this calamity. So this bold we breaking out as the SME came across a huge stepping stone for all political parties, and that is one reason any government that came into power has come into power. So that's what I said in election. So the SME should be the priority of the regime who is in power, because that is the one and only reason that made them to be in power.
Now, you mentioned the number of employees in this sector, but what about the number of businesses? I mean, it's not a small number. It's not 5,000 or 10,000. What are we talking about here?
We are talking about 4.8 million
employees.
Yeah, right. It was about 5.3 million, but of course with shutting down, there about 1 million went out of jobs, and about 300,000 SME companies, MSME companies closed down.
300,000.
300,000.
Right. So
according to government statistics, last year it was about 290,000, but I believe it's more than 300,000. So if you leave it at 300,000 even, you're talking nearly 1 million people went out of jobs. Of course, went out of jobs means they shut their businesses, but they are still surviving in some other manner, but their companies had to shut down.
Now, these entrepreneurs, many of them, it's like a family oriented. It may be a small shop with 5 employees, or it could be a small factory with 100 or 200 employees. Now, most of these entrepreneurs are still here, aren't they? They haven't sort of, I mean, a few may have migrated, but most of them, with the expertise of running businesses, they are here in this country, aren't they?
That is the only reason, I think, is if you were to take a SME company, they have started something with nothing. Every SME company, including me, though I come from a influential business background, I started my company on my own free will. So this is my baby. So the brainchild is me. So I know where it can be fixed and where it can't be fixed. So 90% of the SME companies are same scenario. That's the very reason they will survive. If not for one, somewhere down the line, because that's their brainchild. They will work out something else for them to carry forward. And that is the reason why the economy is being driven and driving and circulating, and the country is rising and falling or rising and going forward, is because due to this.
And this type of businessmen or entrepreneurs, really, they are not the type who would, once they are forced to close down, they're not going to sort of think, okay, I'll go to the Middle East and drive a truck. They're not going to be happy doing that kind of job. They want to restart back here in Sri Lanka, and I think thousands of them have already restarted, haven't they? That's the growth we're seeing. I mean, if you look at any neighborhood, there were shops, a year ago which were closed down. A year, 2 years ago, half the shops were closed. I mean, even in places like Panchikaat, the heart of industrial Colombo.
So many shops
yeah,
let.
But now most of those shops, I think, are back. They're open.
Back on their.
So those owners have really got back on their feet somehow, right? So these are entrepreneurs who are in our country, whom we should take care of.
These are entrepreneurs. That's what I said. When you are an entrepreneur, you are the brainchild behind the business. So that's why you will not never let your business die off. Maybe you will shut down, but you will find a way, a revenue, a avenue to restart and redrive your way, because that's your bread and butter. From somebody of our nature, we just can't close shop and relocate in somewhere else. But blue chip companies can do that. They have branched out, they have the ability, financial ability, sustainability, they can do that.
And many of them have done that. There are blue chip companies which their factories unfortunately had to close in Sri Lanka.
But they would relocate somewhere else.
They're in Vietnam, they're in Bangladesh, they're in Tamil Nadu.
Kenya. There are so many countries in the world who are offering so much of perks for these countries. Now recently, Nileksha, I was in Kenya on behalf of trying to bring the SME in Kenya and Sri Lanka together, bridge together. I was amazed and surprised of the facilities these SME organizations are being given in these countries. They are given special free special free trade zones are being allocated, and these zones have the ability, the funding is being given for them, the land is given, the funds are given, and the environment is being paved for these companies to thrive. So that's how they look after SME companies. But in Sri Lanka, the little we ask even, we are being given so much of negativity.
And it's from the top down to the bottom, isn't it? I mean, if you open a shop in a suburban area or in a village, the Pradesh Sabha is going to come and say, you need to pay this, you need to pay that, and then of course you need to treat those Pradesh Sabha people a little well. So in the end, actually starting something up is not easy. The officialdom gets in the way, doesn't it?
Because I think the government and the Pradesh Sabha and the Palat Sabha, they don't work in hand to hand. Like, every Pradesh Sabha has their own law to the government. So what happens is, it's so difficult. I think, an entity should be linked together. What the main government says. Now recently I was shocked, when you lose a license, you have to go and get it stamped from the registrar, RMV, that is run by the main government, and go to the Pradesh Sabha to obtain pay the money and obtain the certificate. So that is a total different entity. So when you go there, these things are not relevant for them. They have their own set of people. So things like these are things that get in the way of trying to start a business even.
So I was talking to another entrepreneur last week, and he said that when he put up his neon board, the Pradesh Sabha guys came and measured it and said that according to the size of the board, you need to pay something. You need to pay something much extra. So he said, how am I supposed to market my establishment if I am forced to use a smaller board? So it doesn't make sense, does it?
This is what I'm saying. The bigger companies have a way of getting about, but the smaller fish is always squeezed in among the big fish. So this is what I'm saying. I mean, we can go on and about these things, but those are not solutions in election. Solutions should be taken by the government that has been given a huge mandate. Why? The reason to protect the people in the country, protect the SMEs in the country. It's not giving facts or figures what we need. We need action. We need things to be taken to show that we are being looked after. Because what we need is financial aid through a banking sector where at least if they can't put up a bank for the SMEs right now, at least all these government banks and private banks should be institutes should be driven and given to say that they should have a different department in trying to help the SMEs. Then people who are in the crib should be taken into consideration through the government and advised by the bank, at least temporary, these people to be taken out on the MPL note. So little aids of that nature at least should be given for them as a breathing space.
Well, you call them little aids, but they are very far-reaching, aren't they? Now, if you take the crib, for example, as soon as a businessman takes out a loan, that of course is registered in the crib, and if COVID hits or the government goes bankrupt and so he loses business and he can't pay, it becomes an NPL, a non-performing loan. And after 3 months, there's a little black mark in the crib, right?
Yes.
And then if he needs a little bit more help, if he goes to that bank or another bank, they're going to look up the crib and say, sorry,
yes, because you're very correct, Anileksha, but I'm trying to explain is, now this crib is the evaluation point for any organization or any individual. Now, if I were to just to break down, NPL level in 2019 was only 680 billion.
680 billion rupees.
Yes.
Okay. In 2019.
Yes, but in span of 3 years, in 2023, by end, it went up to 1.3 trillion.
My goodness.
So, I'm just trying to show you, but till 2090, when the country was doing good, when the economy was okay, people managed to take loans, they paid their loans, and people who went as MPL was a very insignificant. 680 billion is not a big amount in rupees.
It was certainly manageable and within the banking regulations and standards.
Yes. It was very manageable for any banking institute, and you never heard of people the Parata execution being taken into consideration, and this was implemented in businesses. But this came into action is after the country's downfall. So who is to be blamed? The government and the country. Now if the new regime obviously should have known about these things. They are very...
Well, I think they did, because it was in their campaign promises.
No, that's what I was trying to explain. So they should have known about how and what are the measures they are going to take. And this is something that was in the books for so many years, 50 odd years. For 6 years of independence, but nearly 50 odd years, we have been, crisis fighting for this sort of change. So if the change has occurred, now putting the system in place is nothing new. That should take place immediately. I mean, these are people who came with statistics. These are people who had done their homework before coming into their seats. I mean, take the Deputy Finance Minister. Now, he is an individual who speaks of, he has done his homework so much. Then he should be prepared to give answers.
And action, not just
rhetoric. But I mean
yes.
Actions. Action is on, when we, not to give stories of we are going ahead doing. Not doing should be done. It should be done yesterday, not tomorrow.
And are you a little disappointed at the slow pace of change? But are you also hopeful that very soon these changes will be brought in?
Yes, disappointed. I don't know if I can use the word disappointed, but what we are
there is a frustration at the slow
sort
pace.
of frustration, because at the moment what we are doing right now is what was already done. I mean, ADB gave us 100 million loan that when this the forum was initiated, I was from the initiate stage itself. I have been there for these meetings, and they gave us this $100 million dollars for the SME was allocated, 50 million to be funded through the bank, other to be funded through the government without having any collateral. You individually pay. So this funding is already given, and there it was already.
In fact, I've heard of this 100 million
yes.
from the ADB. Several, for about a year now, I think it's being tossed around by various political parties as if it was a huge achievement on their part, but in fact it's the same 100 million, isn't it?
It is the same 100 million that we were talking of, where we initiatedly took part in the initiate meetings. But what I'm trying to say is these are already there in the picture. Nothing new. Even the Parata extension was already in the picture. What was given up to, we have requested this from the previous regime also, and they also said that they are going to do something. But what I'm asking is not doing what you've already done. We need changes. We need significant changes to say that, these are things that is being done. These are on the plate. Here is the difference what we are making. Taxes has to come down. I mean the VAT, end of the day, Nilesh, all this goes upon to the consumer. Though the dollar has come down to 280, 90, it's been fluctuating between 80 and 90, but the consumer does not benefit. Because end of the day, the taxes, the utilities, the every other thing, the scarcity of the market goods will also bring upon the need to increase the prices. So you and I will never benefit out of the dollar reduction if the pace is not being properly paved.
Now let's talk about the Parata execution. This is basically when a business can't pay their loans, and then the banks are empowered, banks and other financial institutions are empowered to come and seize the assets of that particular business, and that of course means that it's that much more difficult for that businessman or woman to get back on their feet.
Absolutely.
So this is protecting the banking industry, which of course needs to be protected. It needs to be strong.
Yeah, it is making so much a profit.
So that's the other side of the story.
During the bad periods, during the corona period, during the pandemic, during the crash of economy, still bank made profit. So that shows, what is the biggest saying? Is we need to protect the depositors. Depositors are you and me, and this is very simple. It's logically it's simple. But I always say these loans are being already dispatched. It is been dispatched. So these are still only on paper. Now the funding is on paper to show that this X amount of things the bank has acquired as the assets. This X amount of assets is just only on paper.
Right.
So shifting them a little bit is not going to really harm the bank. Only harm the not even the depositors, the shareholders.
Yes.
Where their profits will come down and they will be pinched. And I am sure of a crisis of this nature, they can be shifted a little bit here and there.
No, this there was a moratorium, I think, for 1 year on the Parata execution. Yes. But 1 year isn't a very long period of time. And what you guys are asking is not for another extension, but for
permanent solution.
A permanent solution, right?
Yes.
Because just giving another 6 months and another it's not going to
that is never will be a solution. This will be just another thing that was done and swept under the carpet. It's not the thing. Parata execution or the Parata law itself has to be amended according to the country's situation. This law itself that was brought upon in this country is never been executed in the country that was created even.
Right. So what you're basically asking is for the Parata law to be
amended according to the today's
thrown out.
No, don't. I mean, the bank will never throw it out, and we can never expect. But you can amend it. You can bring it about in a way where the protection will be given to the banks plus the institute or the person who is obtaining the loan. Here the person who is obtaining the loan becomes very fragile in a situation of this nature because he has nowhere else to turn to.
Now in many economies, Tania, the banks are the strength behind an entrepreneur. Is that really the case in Sri Lanka?
Never the case. I think banks are service providers in every part of the world. In Sri Lanka, the bank is the biggest profit-making organization. Bank is a service provider. They should be providing loans at a very low interest where the businesses and the people have the ability of borrowing funds to uplift their businesses. By that the economy will thrive and the economy will go forward. If you get a loan for a lower interest, obviously your businesses have the ability of generating profits. When the loan of your bank is more than what you can bear, then the amount of profit you make becomes so thin, narrowed down to a position where we won't be competitive in the world market or even in the Sri Lankan market itself. So that's when we say our interests are so high, I mean people, they can't even believe we borrow at this high interest.
In fact, when you take many of the other countries, the interest rates are far lower. I mean,
very low.
Whether it's a housing loan or a business loan, it's very low.
God, insignificant. I mean, European sector, it's one digit, lower level one digit, 3 to 5%. Now, even in India, when we say our interest rates are in higher 2 digits, they can't even believe it. These are our neighboring countries you're talking about. So that's what I said, bank is a service provider. They should be giving a loan at a very nominal rate where the businesses can thrive. If they thrive, where the economy will thrive. If the economy will thrive, the country thrives.
But now, Tania, the government owns or controls many of the largest banks. I mean, especially Bank of Ceylon and People's Bank, but there are so many other state banks, the smaller ones, or the medium-sized ones perhaps. So the government is very much present in the banking sector. So why is it that the government or successive governments simply haven't intervened on the side of the economy of the country?
I think for the simple reason, for a country of our magnitude, I think we have some 30 odd financial banking. We have a huge number. I think that number is too bigger in size for our economical. I mean, we have a 80 billion GDP. So for a country of this nature, I don't think we need this amount of banks. I think we can merge these banks together. By doing that, the banks will have the ability and the facilitating the borrower in a bigger and a wider beneficiary scale, I believe. This is what I believe. And of course, like you mentioned, the Bank of Ceylon and People Bank, these banks were really created to facilitate, the People's Bank were created to facilitate the small businesses. Bank of Ceylon was created to facilitate the farming sector, to give loans at a very low level, but it has now become a business now, because these loans are hugely given to bigger blue chip companies, huge organizations, and they have become the people who has not paid.
There have been many horror stories coming out of the state banks.
Unbelievable. I mean, these numbers are huge.
You are talking hundreds of millions or even billions.
Billions. Where if you take the SME itself, it is a very insignificant amount.
What's a typical loan for an SME? 5 million or something like that?
I mean, if you were to take micro companies, it is below 5 million. So that is a very small amount. But if you were to take bigger companies, medium size, it might be about between 20, maximum about 25 million. And if you were to take the bigger scale, the higher end of the SME, it's everything is below 50 to 60 million, because SME does not fall above 50 million category. People are hardly going for loans of that nature, other than the bank itself would not facilitate.
Right, but
other than if you have a huge project report and you're going in for a huge project.
Right, but that's 40, 50 million would be 300, 400 employees probably.
Yes,
so
yes.
you are not exactly, it's not a
That's
small
high
end, that's a high end
of the SME organizations.
Right.
So, I think banks understand these people and they value these people, and of course the bank always want to facilitate the person who pays. So you can't pay in the bank, but that is where the government comes in, protecting the bank plus the businesses. So they should bring about policies in trying to protect the organizations.
Absolutely. We are going for a short commercial break right now. We're in conversation with Tania Abeysundara, chairperson of the Ceylon United Businesses Alliance. Don't go away, we'll be right back.
Trusted place for your fixed deposit. Valuable FD, a symbol of stability.
The Lanka T10 Super League is hitting the pitch for the first time in Sri Lanka. 6 fierce teams, 1 trophy. Redefining the game on home soil. From the 11th to the 19th of December at the Pallekali International Cricket Stadium. Chase the pace of high-speed T10 cricket.
Trusted place for your fixed deposit. Valuable FD, a symbol of stability.
Welcome back to Face to Face. We're in conversation with Tania Abeysundara, chairperson of the Ceylon United Businesses Alliance. Now, Tania, we were talking about some of the steps that the SME sector really needs to really spur on the growth, basically. And we spoke about the Parata situation and also a little bit about the crib. Now with the crib, what is the step that needs to be taken? Is it a sort of a re-looking and reworking of the rules of the crib, and the way the banks use the crib?
Nilesh, I think what the SME expects is we had the major 6 points what we really requested all political organizations, and we had given them this written document prior to the election. First one was the Parata execution that was taking place, Parata, and then amendments to the Parata, and we wanted a temporary suspension, and of course with the suspension we wanted a permanent solution for this. That is number one. The government needs to work on this, discuss with the SME organizations, bring about and understand how this can be driven. That is number one. Number two is having state-owned or facilitating organizations for SME companies to have working capital. That is the biggest problem these people, SME organizations have, is the working capital, because most of these companies, in Sri Lanka especially, our market is a very volatile market. You really don't know how it changes. Any moment it can change. So we are talking about a volatile market. If unprecedented decisions are being taken, this volatile market can't sustain. So why I say that is because our market is very small. So when the market is small, you are playing around hugely. So you need to give the buyer credit. So when that happens, sometimes if the credit facility exceeds more than 30 days to 60 days, sometimes 90 days, then what happens is we will be left without a working capital. That doesn't mean to say it's mismanagement. It is the way of the nature of the Sri Lankan
The
businesses.
volatile nature of Sri
Volatile
Lankan.
nature of the Sri Lankan businesses and how the businesses have groomed itself. Everybody, when you go up to a buyer, my first thing he will ask, how long was my credit period? So if you say you are not giving credit, then you are not. You won't be a very.
You won't be able to be competitive and capture the business.
You can't be competitive. You can't capture the business. You are not the most favorite person to go. So whoever who facilitates the credit becomes, maybe the price can be a little bit higher if they are offering a credit period. That's where they will obtain, because these big businesses, or I mean, if you were to take the bigger businesses, the smaller businesses become their selling point to them. So you always depend on them. So they have the ability to call the shots. So that is one thing. So that's why I said we need working capital. Expansion comes with working capital, sustainability comes with working capital. So to have the working capital, the bank or a financial institute should intervene. How can you get intervened? If you are in the crib and if you are in an NPL level, no financial institute would touch you. That's where the government comes into action. Number 3 is the government needs to understand the magnitude and the manner of this SME organization. So we urged any political party that came into power for them to have a separate SME. Any ministry should have a SME representative. What I meant was SME representative, the ministry should have, or the direct accessible to the president to advise on each subject. You can't have subject minister, but we can have subject advisors. Now if you were to take every industry, the problem and the magnitude it is being driven is different. So I come from a garment industry background, but I can't go and give my expertise on tourism industry now. So there should be somebody who would advise on that. So that, I mean, if you have to go through these chambers, it will never happen. So what we requested the president, whoever who was going to come into power, to have necessary people who are job oriented, who will understand these organizations, who has studied about this, who has the ability, and these people shouldn't be professors and bookworms. These people should be hands-on people who has the experience of running a business.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise it will be just onto a book only. You don't have the practical knowledge, only theoretical.
In fact, during the campaign of the NPP, they did mention that they would have advisory councils to advise the ministers.
Yes.
But those haven't been appointed yet, and we hope that will happen soon.
That is a very needed thing, advisory board in advising the minister, and this advisory board should be given the ability of sitting alongside with the president and telling him the real truth what is happening, because the previous governments also never had this thing, and that is what that caused the country to get into this calamity. And the third thing is the fourth thing what we are requesting is for the SME organizations to be competitive in the world market. We need obviously protection, we need policies, we need adequate avenues for us to go in there, because if the utilities, if the pricing, the taxes and whatever the raw materials are being bought upon into the country, purchased at a higher rate, we can't be competitive in the market, plus the local market plus the export market. Now every government is expecting any semi-organization to go into the export market. For us to go into the export market, we need to be competitive. We need every raw material in this country is being imported
almost
everything almost. So that means we are not facilitated the industries. Then we need to understand and segregate the market. I have been always asking and telling, please understand the consumer market. Consumer market is only 21 million. out of that, realistically talking, if you were to take the kids and the older people and the youth and the people who consume more are about 13 to 14 million. So this is the market you are really pushing into. So if this market is your market playground, then we need to understand the consumer. If we are needing of, this is hypothetically talking, if you need 100 metric tons of sugar for the consumer market, if sugar is being allowed to bring up on 200 metric ton, the dollar that can be utilized for something else is going for something else.
Absolutely, yes.
So that is where the scarcity comes in. That is where the liquid comes in. Liquid dollar scarcity would arise because our imports to exports are always more than 8 to 10 billion gap. Our imports are about 20 billion, where our export is about 12 to 13 billion. So there is that gap is always there.
So how are you
going to bridge the gap? Foreign employment funding that comes in, then borrowing that comes in, and the taxes that comes in.
But there are limits to all of those.
These have limitations. How much can you tax the next person? How much can you depend on somebody else? So what I say is the industries have to bloom. They have to branch out. They should be avenued and precisely allocated in areas where these can grow. By doing that only, a country's economy can grow. So that is one thing we ask. For us to be competitive, look into these things, ask us these things, not for a budget bringing us and asking us few questions what should be going into the budget. We should be sitting in there day in and day out trying to understand us. That is a huge factor what we ask. The other thing is what we ask is for national policies. Now there is a mandate being given. We can create national policies. The parliament is the playground that creates all this. That can be easily done.
Absolutely.
That can be easily done because the mandate is immense what we are given them. We have voiced out for this change 3.5 years back. This change has happened because we voiced out. Then it's high time we have been heard.
Now, we talk of national policies, but we seem to have ad hoc policies all the time. For example, if you take the cost of energy, electricity, over the past few years, it skyrocketed, it bounced down a little bit. Now, I think another correction is coming, but in the end, we saw the CEB going from a loss-making institution to one which makes a massive profit, and that's at the expense of
the consumer.
The consumer. I think over 1 million people couldn't pay their bills because it was too high.
And to now, people are finding it so difficult.
And then of course businesses, which if you've got a shop, you've got a fridge and a freezer. And just because the CEB is being run in a horrible way and needs more money to survive, or has got too greedy and wants to earn more billions, the shop owner simply can't turn off his freezer 8 hours of the day, can he? I mean, that's not feasible. You've got to keep all those things going. So again, what's the energy policy with regard to businesses? I mean, for decades we had an energy policy for religious institutions. If you had a religious institution, you got subsidized electricity. But then the same wasn't true for SMEs.
The same wasn't true for the geese that laid golden eggs, because we are the people who drive the economy. Really, that is a sad situation. Like we have been asking for, there are so many avenues of generating electricity. Why wasn't this brought forward? Why isn't it brought forward? Now, if you were to take the north, there is tremendous development happening through India. But that is never the case to the south or to this area, because interference is too much. So this has to stop. That's what I said. Policies, national policies come in here, because you spoke of the utilities. Utilities play a huge factor in any production. That is a huge number. Any production, any raw material, utilities and salaries are the main three biggest expense we carry. Now, out of these things, raw materials are imported 90%, because we do not have raw materials, adequate raw materials.
We've got our rubber and our tea and a few other things, but
I mean, none of these, I mean, if you were to take our rubber, tree or any of these are not hugely developed enough to, other than tea, to sustain the entire market value. So what happens is we end up importing. So where we become naively depending on the dollar fluctuation for the price worsening and high, because there is no proper management there. Then it comes to the utilities. Utilities play the other huge sector, where we pay a tremendous amount, especially SME organizations, because we don't get anything at a concession rate. We do not get anything. So that is a huge thing. And then comes the salaries, because the government keeps saying that we need to increase salaries. Of course, we need to pay our workers. I am no in doubt that we should do that, by only way means of is to keep our workers with us. So we try increasing. So when all these three combine together, we automatically exceeds the price of importing goods.
And there's also the price of the cost of transport, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's another thing, cost of transport, that comes under the utility, the fuel, everything. So that's what I'm trying to say, though we exceed the price of the import goods. So what happens with these FTAs that we have signed also, it's never in favor of us. These FTAs are always in favor of the signing party, not the receiving party as us. Because if we sign with India or Thailand or any other country, it's more in favor of those countries.
So those need to be properly evaluated.
Properly evaluated, and restrictions. Now, if you were to take India, we cannot, anything manufactured in those countries are restricted by importing. Same restriction value should be given to the Sri Lankan consumer market as well. If we have enough sufficient ways of manufacturing, enough for the market, consumer market, then we should be protected. To protect, like BOI companies, SME companies also should have some sort of benefits, tax benefits, reliefs, import reliefs. If we can register a company as a properly organized SME organization, we should have reliefs, because we bring down the raw material. Is only there is the kilo price plus the SSL, but we bring down the button as a finished good. So then the VAT, the tax, MPP, SSP, MPL, everything is been added on to, because the button comes as a finished good, the fabric only comes as a raw material. The thread comes as a finished good, the zipper comes as a finished. So, I mean, I'm just talking about the garment industry. Same way, every industry is suffering the same scenario. Shoe industry. So, this is what I'm saying. The government needs to understand. Only way they can understand is if one of these people are there sitting advising them. I'm trying to understand. This is something we ask them, we are urging them to do in, so bringing in the expertise, not from the practicality expertise, not theoretical expertise.
It can't be just meeting you guys once a month or something like that. It has to be a constant dialogue.
Constant dialogue where we are being taken into consideration, asked and implemented through us. Because if you were to take a minister, they are you can't expect them to do wonders because they are not thorough in that subject. They have been appointed to take decisions. So so you can't blame them. That's what I said. We blame the system. So system to be put in place, only the mandate was given.
Absolutely. Tania, we're almost out of time, but I have a couple of key questions. One is the role of development banks. Now, most countries have development banks where if you're an entrepreneur, you can get a loan at a lower interest, and particular industries are earmarked and they get preferential treatment. And we did have a couple of development banks. I remember in the early 90s it was DFCC and NDB, and those, as far as I recall, they worked marvelously. Whatever projects the government was pushing, those banks funded, and the banks didn't suddenly go bankrupt or anything.
No way.
They did very well, and the economy did very well back then. But then, of course, both those banks were privatized, so they became commercial banks. They are no longer development banks. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Now, President AKD in fact referred to setting up a development bank during his campaign. So, any progress in that respect?
Or
is that still further down the road?
I think it's a further down the road question for us to have a development bank itself coming into action. But the government can take still necessary steps. There are government banks, there are private banks. These banks can be advised to have a different department in the development programming.
Right, so what you're saying is perhaps
trying
Bank
to bring
of
in a
Ceylon
bank itself in a hurry, it will take time. But these banks can have a different
like BOC, People's Bank and so on, they should have a development arm. Development
segment, where that will be directly under the President or the Finance Ministry, where under Industry Ministry, where they will have the ability of looking into. So if you want a loan, we apply through the Ministry of Industries, and the Ministry of Industries will advise the banking area to look into this through their credentials. Now, we would, having a loan, to obtain a loan, we will have some sort of a project report or idea behind this. Now, we can't just go and obtain. So, if we should have the ability and we should have the accessibility to go through the industry ministry, that's why the industry is there. We go to the industry will navigate us to the bank. We try to go direct to the bank. It will be a difficult segment because then they will not want to trust us. They will not want to trust the SME organization. But if it's been diversified through the government, then that's why so development banks, if you can't set up a development bank overnight, you can have an arm through the ministry, through the government, trying to help these people.
Absolutely. And my final question is on tourism, which is again an industry which this government is banking heavily upon, and in fact tourism is picking up thankfully, and great things are expected of it. But with tourism you have your huge name brand hotels with 500 rooms or 1,000 rooms, but it's much easier to start up a small hotel, isn't it? And across Sri Lanka we see people with a spare room, they turn it into
small motels and rest houses.
They put up a couple more rooms in their house and do that. So they become small businessmen in effect. And of course this is money coming in foreign exchange. So shouldn't this sector also be facilitated a lot more?
Absolutely, because tourism industry is an industry everywhere in the world. It can be big or small, will make the country's economy go thriving towards the right direction. Because if you were to take even a business, when a business takes up, when industries come up, the selling point will be hotels and rooms. It doesn't have to be tourists itself. Even on business purpose, when they come into the country, they need a room to stay. They need a
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it can be a bigger, smaller. It doesn't matter the magnitude. It doesn't have to. Everybody does not come and land themselves in a 5-star hotel. They like boutique hotels. They like home environmental hotel. They like little. I mean, according to your budget and your wallet, you pick your room. And even when we go into a foreign country on business, we don't look for luxuries, we look for the facilities, facilitating the environment. So when we are there, it can be, now somebody is coming to Anuradhapura for business purpose, he wants adequate facilities in Anuradhapura. So that's what I mean. The small tourism organizations what was shut down during the pandemic due to not mismanagement but due to the lack of people coming in, has to be looked into, has to be facilitated. They had to, that's what I said, these are things that if you go to the bank they won't touch you, but if you were diversify this through the industry, that's why the Ministry of Industries, the Ministry of Finance should have an arm who will be advising these people. Okay, so and they should have also a different department to bringing in this sort of problems, understand this sort of problem. We have so much of government employees, they themselves don't know what is their job role.
Absolutely.
I mean, every seat has more than 5 people. You are overpopulated because they don't know their job role. So these people can be put in for proper usage. Understand your ministry, see what is in your ministry, what can be put into proper use, what areas can be brought upon in departments in trying to help the people. So these are little things where money is not needed. These are only, you need policies, you need decisions. For these
proper directions
and decisions. So these decisions won't come through being if you don't have the experience of navigating. That's where you need a person who understands to navigate.
A lot of food for thought indeed, and I'm afraid we are out of time. My thanks to Tania Abeysundara, who is of course the chairperson of the Ceylon United Businesses Alliance. Thank you, Tania, for being with us once again after several months. And thank you to you at home for watching. Don't go away because the news is coming up next. Have a good evening.